are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin here representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free until spring. We're running a promo for the weekend. Use the promo code CANES24. Offer valid until Monday. Today, I've got Greg Smith, National Recruiting Analyst. Newly promoted. I just want to say congratulations, my guy.
Yeah, thank you.
To the position. Of course, he covers the Midwest for Rivals.com. And Rivals released its final 2024 rankings, and the Miami Signees made some noise here, Greg. So wanted to have you discuss the movement in the rankings. And first, just, Marquise Lightfoot jumps into the 5-star class, I guess you could say, man.
Yep.
He had an outstanding All-American Bowl. You were in the room to kind of discuss his production. What was the discussion like, and why did he make that jump to being a 5-star?
Yeah, it's interesting, and thank you for having me back on, man. It's always good to be with you. He was one that, it wasn't like there was a lot of debate because of the fact that he had the kind of the perfect storm where, so he was in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl. I was down there. Our director of recruiting, Adam Gorney, was down there, and our rankings director, Adam Friedman, was down there, right? And so we basically had the Midwest guy, and then the two guys that also swing big hammers in those rankings meetings to see him, and he completely dominated all week. So because of that, when we got time to actually make him a 5-star, it was just like, oh yeah, this is going to happen, because he was so good in that week. And it wasn't just I think he had a sack and a half and a couple pressures in the actual game, but it wasn't just that. During the week, he was unblockable. And I've made the joke that some of those offensive linemen on the other team had to have nightmares about him because he was just running around them all week. The thing that really stands out about Lightfoot and his play is that he's got such a quick first step off of the line, right? He's so fast to get around the edge. As you can see in the video clip that's up there, if you look at his arms and look at how long his arms are, he also, can just extend and get on guys and kind of shuck them away really easily too. He's got a good spin move as well. Like, I think that once he continues to, refine his game, he gets stronger in the college weight room down in Miami. He's going to be a nightmare for people to deal with. Like, he's a fantastic prospect.
Yeah, can't wait for him to, be under the tutelage of a Jason Taylor too. Just to learn from a Jason Taylor. I mean, they have very similar build and have a very similar motor as well. I mean, I watched Jason Taylor, for his entire career as a Miami Dolphin. And the one thing that I could say about him is that he had a relentless motor. He never stopped his pursuit of the quarterback. And that's kind of what I saw from Lightfoot as well during the All-American Bowl. But besides him, Booker Pickett also had an outstanding couple of All-Star games. I mean, he was at the UA All-American game and at the Polynesian Bowl, and he just kind of jumped off the screen for me. And he made it into the top 100 with his performance. So what was the conversation like about Booker Pickett?
Yeah, he's another kind of long, lean pass rush specialist, right? He had a ton of production in high school, and this is where it's a little different with him, where you sometimes don't know. Where sometimes in these rankings calls, like, guys have a huge amount of production. I think it was 30 sacks just as a junior that Pickett had, and then has a good senior season, and you just don't know when you want to see him in person. So the guys see him down in Orlando, and John Garcia was down there, and Friedman and Gorney were down there as well. And you see him in person, and he does the same stuff that he was doing on High School Friday nights. He does down in Orlando. Then he goes to Polynesian Bowl and also performs well out there. He's just another really good pass rusher. And it's funny, and we were kind of joking about this before we got on, is that it feels like Booker Pickett is like the other guy in this group of defensive linemen and pass rushers that Miami has coming in, which is just kind of insane because in most other classes around the country, he'd be like the gem of the defensive class. But Miami has done such a good job of putting this group together that he's the fourth guy on that defensive line.
Yeah, it's really outstanding, the defensive line class that Miami's kind of put together with a Booker Pickett, with an Elias Rudolph, with an Artavius Jones, with a Justin Scott, Armando Blunt. I feel like I might be forgetting somebody. Cole McConaughey is another one on that defensive line. Just an outstanding group, top to bottom. First, I want to get your opinion on the defensive line. Is it the best in the country? Is what Miami Hurricanes fans want to know. And just, overall of just kind of, watching recruiting over the years, how does this D-line compare to historic D-lines?
Yeah, but the short answer on what Canes fans want to know is yes. This is definitely, to me, the best defensive line haul in the country. And if you're going to have a position, if you're going to have a position where you have the best haul in the country, there are two spots that I think that you want to be at, and that's defensive line and offensive line, because it just shows up so much and can impact and affect the game each and every week. And when you bring in a haul on the defensive line like this, you can do so many different things with that group down the road, right? And because they have a good handful of these guys, and there's a mixture of skill sets where you have guys, like Lightfoot and like Pickett that are really, demons off the edge that can rush the passer, but you've got a guy like Justin Scott and Armando Blunt who can also be interior guys, but by the way, have the quickness to be able to bounce outside. And we saw Justin Scott did that down in San Antonio. He played some defensive end down there as well and held his own against tackles. And so when you have that mixture of guys, it can really help you along your defense, because we all know that a good defensive line really sets the tone for what your defense is going to do. And by the way, Miami doesn't have slouches coming in that secondary either. And so you end up in a situation where they've got top to bottom, back to front, a really good group coming in on that defense. Now, in terms of where it stacks up historically, I think that this is as good as I've seen in the time that I've been covering recruiting, which has been 10 plus years. Because it's not just top heavy, and it is top heavy because you have 3 5-stars coming in along that defensive line. In Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, and now Marquise Lightfoot, who got elevated this last go round with the final rankings. But you also have other guys like we've talked about, Pickett and some of the others that are also in the group that are solid prospects. And then you mentioned what I think is the X factor with this group, and that's these guys being coached up by Jason Taylor. Like, that is, if you want to talk about a place to go to get developed and a guy that is going to help you get closer to your dreams in the NFL, which I'm sure was part of the recruiting pitch to land all these guys, Jason Taylor would be that guy. And I think it's just a fantastic marriage of all of this talent and then the position coach that they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spoke with Marquise Lightfoot when he was down here for the cookout during the summer, and he basically communicated that, a big reason why he decided to be a Miami Hurricane is because of Jason Taylor. Right. They want to be taught by the best, and to get that opportunity to be taught by a Hall of Famer, I don't think it's an opportunity a lot of these kids can really pass up. And, everything else that Miami brings as well, as far as, location, NIL opportunities, an opportunity to really make some noise in the ACC, because it's a conference that I think is up for grabs year for year. Clemson doesn't have a stranglehold on this conference anymore, it seems. So right. I think they see the opportunity to really make noise on a national stage. But besides that outstanding defensive line class, and we're watching highlights of Booker Pickett here for those who are wondering, Miami picked up position, skill position guys as well. And one particular guy was Jordan Lyle, who also with the 2024 final rankings ended up as a top 5 athlete at his position at running back. What was the conversation about Jordan Lyle, you know, making the top 5 at running back?
Yeah, I think that Jordan Lyle is a guy who also, had really good production during his time in high school. As a senior, he had 21 touchdowns, and he ran for it was 10.6 yards per carry, which is nothing to sneeze at, right? Like, you picking up a first down every single time you get the ball down in the state of Florida, you're doing something, right? And I think that he's also a guy that has a high upside, right? As we look at running back was interesting this year, and I think that it was kind of jumbled up and hard to kind of pick which guy was the top guy. Nate Frazier was a guy that ended up, I think, as our number one, our highest rated guy. But other than that, like, it was kind of a mixed bag, and it was kind of take your pick on which guy you like the best. I did like Lyle. I think that he'll be a nice pickup for Miami moving forward, as a guy that is a potential home run threat, but can also get it done on a down-to-down basis for the Canes behind what has become an emerging offensive line. You got a freshman left tackle down there that did pretty well this year as well. Talk about those lines of scrimmage. When you get that going, it makes those running backs look even better. But I think that Jordan Lyle is a really good pickup and well deserving of being a top 5 running back in this class.
Was it contentious as far as like the conversation in the room of who would be like the top guy, or if Lyle would make the top 5? Because I think a lot of Hurricanes fans may be disappointed that Kevin Riley ended up flipping to Alabama. How close was this race though at running back?
Yeah, there was some discussion there, like, because like I said, it was really, kind of jumbled up in that next group of guys. And I think that, Lyle is, again, deserving of making it in there, but it could have been a number of guys. So I wouldn't say that it was contentious per se. Like, it wasn't like kind of a wide receiver when it comes to like who's your favorite guy there, outside of JJ Smith. Like, once you got past him, like, the order there was really contentious. But as far as running back, I don't think that it was really, that hard fought, but he's definitely deserving of being in there. But yes, the Kevin Riley deal definitely hurt.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Miami, they are not just recruiting South Florida either. I mean, obviously Lyle and a lot of those D-line guys that we talked about are from South Florida or from Florida. But Miami is starting to really go into the Midwest, and we kind of seen that within the past couple of weeks. And I know that is kind of your stomping grounds over there. What are you hearing about Miami really kind of making a stamp over there in the Midwest, especially the Chicago area, where they got, of course, a Marquise Lightfoot and a Justin Scott for this 2024 class?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm hearing from both prospects and then high school coaches, 7-on-7 coaches, is that it's a welcome addition for the U to come into the Midwest and really recruit that area hard. And part of this is that, I know these guys would say this and it's going to sound like it's biased, but I think it's actually true, is that those kids in the Midwest, I think, get overlooked a lot. But what ends up happening is those kids end up populating Big Ten schools and having productive careers, especially those kids in the trenches. And so if you want to go and get quality players that are going to be on your lines of scrimmage, and you need to inject some toughness into your program, you should come to the Midwest, and you should particularly come to Chicago, which is what I think is under recruited for the high end prospects that are there. Like, I think that, your mid-level Power 5 schools like to come there and cherry pick because they know they can get quality guys. But when you get higher, like more upper echelon programs or programs that are on the rise, like Miami coming in there, it catches people's attention. And when you think about a specific prospect that I've got my eye on, and I know the staff was in to see, was Nathaniel Marshall, a defensive end out of Chicago. I really like his game. I think that he's a guy that's going to continue to rise up the rankings, even though he's pretty highly ranked right now as a 6.0 4-star, and the number 23 player in the entire country for 2025 right now. I think that's a guy that Miami is going to recruit really hard and try and go back-to-back years with getting, some highly ranked defensive linemen out of the Chicago area. Like I said, it's an area that I think is under recruited by the big boys, and Miami coming in there is really nice. It was interesting too that Miami was up here during kind of this whole Midwest, which is blanketed with snow when we were in this deep freeze for the last couple of weeks. And that's when Miami kind of came in to do it. That actually makes a little bit of a statement, right? We're going to still kind of make our way through all of this to get to see you guys. I think that was noticed as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was scary for me, being a Florida guy myself, to kind of see the snow. And, I know Cristobal is a Florida guy himself, but of course he's kind of used to it, I guess, from his time at Oregon. But yeah, just to see Miami just kind of go into that area. And I agree with you. I feel like the Midwest, and especially Chicago, is which is a city more known for basketball.
Right.
Just to kind of go in and try to get the top recruits again in a back-to-back cycle, is really showing just how much Miami is putting into recruiting, the effort that they're putting into recruiting the nation, not just South Florida. What are the other schools that you think that will be in contention for a Nate Marshall, though?
Yeah, I think that he's going to be one that, he's got kind of the whole gamut. He's got close to, 30 scholarship offers out there for him. But I think Ohio State is another one to watch. They're a school that, with Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach, is always in the mix for these top recruits. And it'll probably, with Ohio State, be a similar situation that it continues to happen there. And I've talked to Ohio State people about this, is that every year people are now negative recruiting against them about how long is Larry Johnson actually going to be there, right? Like we saw that with the whole Justin Scott situation as well. So you guys are familiar, but that is a real talking point on the recruiting trail for them. I think Notre Dame will try and be in the mix there for Nate Marshall too. Michigan as well, but we'll kind of see what happens as they transition away from Jim Harbaugh. But, Alabama was in the mix, but they had a coaching change, and we'll see what happens with Kalen DeBoer as well. So it's an interesting time to really kind of make the push with Nate Marshall, because, and I've said this a couple of times about different recruits too, is right now, one of the big things that you can sell on the trail to kids is stability, right? If you can say, hey, we're on an upward trajectory and our coach is going to actually be here, that is, it has now become, it's so weird to say it, but that has become a big thing in recruiting because of how much change and turnover we've been having, especially late in cycles. And that can be a kind of a card that Miami can play really in its favor.
Yeah, last question, man. It's kind of a wild card because I didn't discuss this earlier, but yeah, the big news is Jim Harbaugh leaving Michigan. I mean, it's just, I think we all kind of saw this coming, though, right? I mean, because he's been kind of interviewing, and I think he's at actually the best spot that he could possibly be in the NFL, with the Los Angeles Chargers, and starting with Justin Herbert over there, who, of course, Mario Cristobal kind of helped groom. Right. But now there's like, this is kind of what happens now in college football. Like other programs become scavengers, right? Right. You're like, okay, well, what's left in your program, or who could we possibly add to our class? When you look at that Michigan class, even the 24, who has, I believe, a month or so to transfer in and out, and maybe any future classes. Are any players that should be on the watch as far as the Michigan roster is concerned?
Yeah, well, yeah, they just won the national championship, and even though they had a ton of guys leave, they still got a lot of talent in the cupboard up there, right? And so it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with that. And I think the guy that I think that everyone is watching is their superstar defensive lineman, Mason Graham. This has been like the defensive line podcast, which is fine, it's important, but right. He's a guy that everyone is going to be circling to see what happens. And the key thing for what's going on at Michigan is it feels like the overwhelming favorite to get that job is Sharon Moore, the offensive coordinator who stepped in for Jim Harbaugh on what Harbaugh's many suspensions that happened this past year, which is wild to think about. He missed like half the games for suspension. And so because he's got that rapport with the team, they all seem to want him, right? And so it made that hiring him and making that quick transition may keep their roster together. And I don't think that you'll see kind of a full scale like exodus with the top players like you did at, say, Alabama. But the thing to watch is for them is if they continue recruiting at the level that they were under Jim Harbaugh, like here recently, right? And we talk about some of that Midwest toughness that they've injected in, like that Miami is trying to inject into the program. Michigan took that blueprint and ran with it, and it's how they've been beating Ohio State, right? If some of those guys, you can start to chip away at a couple of those guys, that's what ends up really helping your program. It's like getting a couple here and there in that 25 class because of that transition is something to really keep an eye on. People really seem to like Sherrone Moore, but he's not Jim Harbaugh, right? Jim Harbaugh is one of the best football coaches walking the planet, right? And so there's going to be some slippage on that. And so that's something to definitely watch for the future more so than the current time.
Absolutely. It'll be very interesting to kind of see where these players go. You know, a lot of players will likely exit just like we saw in Alabama. But one thing I will say about the national championship, Greg, is that I think it gave Hurricanes fans some hope here because this is a team that was kind of built in the trenches. And that's what you see with Mario Cristobal's recruiting classes. They first had an emphasis on the offensive line in that 23 class. And now this 24 class, obviously, there's an emphasis on the D line. And it's not like they had a ton of great skill guys. Obviously, you had, the running backs with Blake Corum and the other running back as well. But this was a team that was built in the trenches, and it's not like they had a top 5 class. So I think Miami, with now a top 4 class, according to Rivals, I think the future is really bright and that they can indeed get to the playoff, especially with the playoff extending to 12 teams here.
Yeah, and the key guy in all of this, I think one that we haven't actually mentioned yet is that Cam Ward, that quarterback, right? I think that when you get a quarterback like that can be a game-changing player, that can really change the trajectory of everything that's going on, because if you know that you're going to put up some points, you can break in some of those young defensive linemen on the other side, right, as you kind of go along. And then once you get that ball rolling, that can really help your program moving forward. And so, yeah, I do think that's a great point that it should give Hurricanes fans hope, because I think that when you look at teams that win at a high level, when you look at the Georgias and Alabamas of the world, Michigan this season, like they are built up front, like there are always skill position players, but that you're right, that Michigan team did a good job of identifying and developing their skill position versus just going out and getting the highest rated guys, which is just another way that you can do it. It's easier to do that though with those skill position players when the trenches are well taken care of and you've got a great offensive and defensive line, because that makes everything better. So I think you're on the right track there with how Mario Cristobal is building this program, because it gives you a larger room for error everywhere else.
Absolutely. That's Greg Smith, ladies and gentlemen, for Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst for the Midwest. Great stuff from you as always. Love having you on, and hopefully we can have you on another time in the future, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. We look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, Live from Canes County, and also subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. We're running a promotion this weekend. Use the promo code CANES24. Until the next episode.